Cool. I want to jump back a little bit. You started talking about language, and I've talked about language with some of my other podcast guests as well. So I want to dive a little bit into that. So you said it's your English is your fourth or fifth language, you said?
Fourth, fifth, yeah.
What are the first three or four?
First of all, before I answer this question, how do you call someone who speaks 3 languages?
Trilingual?
Trilingual, you got that right. Boom. 2 languages.
Bilingual?
Boom. You check that right. 1.
Monolingual?
Well, that could be it, but not like what I'm looking for, really.
What are you looking for?
Try harder. American. Yeah. It's always a joke that I crack. Not that Americans don't speak, a lot of languages and stuff. But,
it's true.
Yeah.
So we just had a little interruption there for the camera fell.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, but diving back into it, we're talking about language.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, your joke. Yeah. So what languages do you speak?
Yeah. My first language, basically, as I mentioned, Kenya alone has 44 different tribes. And these different tribes, they speak different languages, And so the only language that unites us is basically Swahili, which is the national language. And then, because a lot of people, not everybody, but majority of the nation speaks Swahili. And so most radio broadcasts would be in Swahili. Most leaders would communicate in Swahili and stuff. But Luo, which is my native language, that's my first language.
Is it Luo? Am I saying that right?
Luo, yeah.
Luo.
Yeah,
Okay.
I say that right, yeah. So Luo basically is like my first language. The Luo in Kenya, they are around 6.5 million. They should be the 4th or 5th largest tribe in Kenya. And so, so Luo is my first, and then Swahili, I would say, is my second. Now, Luya is my second language. Basically, my grandma, as I told you, she used to be a teacher. And so when she was teaching, they transferred teachers to different places to add into the diversity and, different viewpoints and perspectives, So she taught in a different tribe, in a different area, which speaks like the Luya language. Luyas are Bantus. They originated from a different...
Luya is different than Luo.
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, that's
Okay.
different, yeah. So we are Nilots because we follow the river Nile. If you're Nilots,
Okay.
coming to Kenya. Bantus, they came from a different place to Kenya. All these communities came from different places.
Yeah.
And so my grandma used to teach among the Luya population. So I grew up among the Luya. And so I picked up the language, because for like the rest of my life, that's where I grew up in, because she was a teacher and stuff. And so Swahili is like third language, basically. And, with Swahili, everybody can speak Swahili because I learned this in school, and it's the language of business mostly. Language of, you could speak to anyone and stuff and get to understand each other.
Is that the language that like math and science are taught in at schools, in primary school?
No. So that's English now.
Okay.
English comes in 4th language,
Gotcha.
because like now that's the official language. So Swahili is the national language, but English is the official language of business. That's if it's official business, because a lot of businesses are done in local languages, But I would say international business and stuff. And also parliament, they talk in schools, it's most English. And so there's like this sophistication in the sense of the better English you speak in my society, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on whatever's perspective you look at it, the more sophisticated you are, people are running away from their own local languages to associate themselves more with this sophistication in the name of English, and so, which is a different topic altogether. But, English, that's going to be my 4th. And then 5th, now Sheng. Sheng comes in. Sheng basically is the street language. You may think you know Swahili fluently, but when you go to the streets of Nairobi, you'll be like, wait a minute. What the hell are these people talking about? I thought I knew Swahili. It's just like the English that, I'm speaking with you right now. But when you go to Baltimore, you grew up in Maryland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you go to Baltimore and you're in the streets, man, you're like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
You know? So that's the same thing, you know, that street language, street vibe, and that language keeps on metamorphosizing every day, you know? And so that's how Swahili is. So Sheng basically is that street language that, you know, I went to Kenya, like, I've been outside the Kenya, you know, let's say for around 6 years now. But if I went back, the Sheng that was being spoken then is not the Sheng that is being spoken now. I would be like, wait a minute, what's going on and stuff. But so Sheng comes in as my fifth language. And then I could speak some Jamaican patois too, you know. Yeah.
How'd you pick that up?
Yes, so I mostly, you know, in Africa, Jamaican music is big time. Jamaican culture, you know, it's like the closest you're gonna get as far as a lot of other foreign cultures are concerned. The one that a lot of people, especially the people who suffer the most and they just want inspiration as far as music is concerned, you know, the people are justice oriented and stuff, and you know, the music itself. And plus, of course, those people sing, Caribbean people sing praises of Africa. That's where they came from, you know. And so a lot of people connect with Bob Marley's music, and a lot of these plus, you know, Rastafari religion has lots of connections in Africa. And so, you know, it's just, you got to pick it up, you know.
Yeah.
If you don't say any Jamaican words and you live in Kenya, holy smokes, where the hell did you even come from? Or where do you live and stuff? But I also had like a Jamaican girlfriend way back, you know, and so I picked it up. Then Japanese, I can speak some Japanese.
Really?
I did that as a foreign study.
Wow.
Yeah, when I was in university, picked that up as a foreign study. And then I could speak some other local languages too, you know, because as I told you, Kenya is multicultural and stuff. Kikuyu, some Meru words, you know, some Kalenjin words. So you got to pick up a couple of those. Some French too, I could speak some French. I want to learn Spanish so bad, German. I just want to be a global citizen, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many languages do you speak, man?
English, and then I speak Spanish pretty well. Not fluent, but I can get around. And then a little bit of Portuguese, but not much.
Yeah. Tell me any bad words in Portuguese, man.
Portuguese. See, I don't even know. That's
Yeah. Bad words in Spanish.
Yeah, we got La Mota.
La
Puta.
Mota.
Yeah, we're talking about that later.
What is puta?
Puta is like everything. It means bitch, cunt, fuck.
Man.
It's just a bad word.
Oh,
You know?
I've never used that one.
It's-
I've never used that one, man. Oh man.
It's I always like pinche. Pinche is it's a more polite. It's kind of like, it means like fucking in context. Like this is too fucking exhausting. This is pinche, you know. But it's more polite. It's kind of like goddamn, or you know, it's like it's more of a. I always like that one.
How do you learn all these bad words, man?
Playing baseball on a Mexican baseball team in Reno. I learned Spanish in Guatemala mostly, but I had a teacher there. He didn't teach me all the bad words, but playing on a baseball team and you learn pretty quick. And also construction. I did construction
like
for a few years.
puta.
Yeah.
Pinche.
Hijo de puta.
Oh man, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. I love learning when I learn a language, I like learning firstly the bad words first.
Yeah,
you know?
it's kind of like counter how you do it in school, but I honestly think it's easier because then you kind of end up like being able to understand like the conversations that people actually have, and I feel like that's like it's not slang, but it's sort of that's like how people actually think. That's how people actually operate, rather than like learning like airport words. I'm always like, why do you need to learn airport words first? You know.
You remind me when I was growing up, and you know, I could watch TV, and after like maybe watch TV with my parents, and you know, I would only remember the bad words alone, or when people kissed, and they didn't like that. Whenever people started kissing or anything, they would switch off the TV or chest us out and stuff. And so when you're having a conversation, they would be like, if you'd have been remembering schoolwork the way you remember these bad words, you know, so they used to use it against me and stuff. But, you know, bad word is always a thing. That's how you get to learn a new language. Or maybe, you know, get like a girl, you know, from that culture and stuff. That's the easiest way to.
That's, probably the most effective.
Yeah. If you stay with them for long enough, you know, it will be for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And then kind of getting a little more abstract, but still on the topic of language.
Yeah.
What is it like when you think? Like when you think, do you think in language, or do you think on a sort of sublingual level? How do you balance all these words, all these language contexts that you have? How does that work?
It's like 3D, man, 3D. Or maybe 5D. You know, I think in 5 dimensions. You know, good. Like if you tell me a word right now, I have to think first in my own native native language.
So that's what you go to first,
and then translate it to Swahili, and then boom, translate it to English, and so. It's always like there's a fast process in our heads, especially if you're multilingual. Anybody, I mean, you speak, more than whatever, you'd understand this. If someone right now told you a question in ask you like a Spanish whatever question and stuff, there are lots of things that goes on around your brain. You're trying to figure out what's going on and stuff, So I'm always caught up in that situation. And sometimes some people might not understand this. Like here in America, it's like, hey, boom, someone asks a question, they expect you to give them an answer, And so in my world, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. I would take time, process it and stuff, especially if it's like something. I mean, I'm doing my PhD right now, and like I'm not as quick, as far as, like some Americans or people like English is their first language, They get it so fast, or maybe when they're reading, it's just so fast for them. But I take my time and process and stuff. And so, there's just so many dimensions that, or whatever, each things that go on around my brain. It's all brain work, man, for me to be able to process, like, what's this person talking about? And so sometimes, you'll tell me like a word I've never heard before. I'm like, what is that? So I don't want you to tell me what that is. I want you to put it for me into context, but if you put it for me into context, it's a little bit easier for me not only to understand, but also to remember. Because if you define for me what that is, it's easier for me to forget, But if you put it into context and, give me some case scenarios or example, then boom, that's a little bit easier. Get to, remember it and stuff like that. But it's a mental game, man. Yeah. I would say, even in dates, man. And so, that also one thing that helps me is that when I go out, I'm always talking a little bit too much, So I take control and, control the narrative and the debate, because if I left it up to them, they're going to, thinking like possibly he's not smart enough or something. I asked him a question and he looked away or something, but it's just in my way of trying to process and stuff. And, again, looking away in my culture doesn't mean that we are lying, or doesn't mean that we are less confident or anything like that, the way it is here in America, Looking away, especially if you look at someone straight in the eye in my culture, especially if they're elderly, they are viewed as, you're rude, Your parents will always be, look away, who are you looking at? Stop looking at me and stuff like that. And so we grow up in that fear. And so when you come to a culture like this, where looking someone straight in the eye means that you're not lying, you're confident enough and stuff. So you tend to struggle a little bit. And so when they ask me questions and they expect me to give them an answer instantly, and they look away or look up, and I'm trying to figure out stuff and things like that, they're just like, oh man, I'll never go back to any date with this guy, or something like that. But, it involves a lot. You speak more than two, so you totally understand. Like if they ask you a question in Portuguese, man.
It's
that's how it is, man.
It is one of my experiences that I have pretty much every time I'm traveling. Yeah. In English, I'm pretty good, I like to read, so I've got a vocabulary, and and I feel like I can generally represent myself pretty well in English. But when in Spanish, every single time I'm in Costa Rica or Guatemala or something like that, I always have this experience where I feel like socially dumb. It's like I'm just like I go from being pretty sharp in English, what I'm used to, and then I'm just like I can't make jokes. There's like I can always say the right things, but I don't have the right cadence. It's I have to think. I can't just.
That's story of my life, man. Sometimes I'm like, I crack jokes with my students. They're nice people. I really love them and stuff. And they don't laugh, And I'm like, wait a minute, I stole this joke from an American, and the Americans still told the same joke yesterday. Are you guys laugh? How come you're not laughing today? But it's because of how I say it, my accent possibly doesn't bring it out as much. And so even if you know the language, there's some other things that you need to also know and add on to them. The way you say it matters a lot. Who you say it to, and a lot of other things. Like, I can teach you Swahili today, but if you went to Kenya and started speaking, people will be like, of course, there will be amazing stuff. But then again, you don't bring it the way that I would do if I was the one saying it, And so, you've got all these factors going on, but it's beautiful. Language is beautiful. That's what brings the world together, you know, and stuff,
Definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm always fascinated by the language, and one more thing on language is in what ways do you think the language has shaped the culture here in America with English, and I think that might be an interesting question to dive into, because as you're joking about, a lot of Americans only know English, so that there's not really a frame of reference. But then also in Africa, in what ways does the language sort of shape the way people think, the way people act? You've brought up a couple things, how kids can be disciplined by anyone in the tribe. So these are some sort of cultural differences. I'm wondering if there's a connection between cultural differences like that and the language, and if you think there's a causation there, or maybe I'm just diving down a...
No, you're totally in order. There's of course, if you just know one thing, and not to say that everybody who knows one thing is boring, but it's boring to just, follow one path in life, You also that's why I meet a lot of Americans, they're always traveling, my goodness, I meet a lot of Americans, they're like, I've been to such a country, I had a good time in Kenya, I have, and stuff like, they're always traveling from Oregon, going to Nevada, you've traveled like I don't know how many states, because you're always trying to seek something different from what you're used to, And so if you know a lot of stuff, like Israel, folks back in Israel, they're brilliant folks because they lived in different parts of the world. And, once they settle in Israel, they have all these different ways of doing things. And so it makes you smarter, first of all, I would say, especially growing up in, and I'm not saying that, Americans are not smart, don't get me wrong in any way. I mean, even here in America, we've got Italian Americans, Irish Americans. You're of Irish descent. You're just telling me that, Indian descent, Native American descent. You've got Kenyan descent, folks, who are of Kenyan descent. Talking of Obama, whose dad came from my tribe, Barack Obama Sr. came from my tribe. So my Luo name is Otieno. So how you also identify a Luo, sorry I diverge a little bit, but it's because the letter O, that's significant. You're going to meet Odhiambo, Opio, Otieno, Obama. Boom, that's where it comes from. So Obama's dad came from my county, and he's also a Luo. And so Obama, has visited, his ancestral home before, and has visited Kenya too and stuff. But coming back to the topic for sure, I personally love traveling. And not just internationally or anything. I just around my own country, because it's like different nations, it's like Lu and Luya, totally different nations. But when we were colonized by the British, they were like, okay, all these 44 different nations are going to form one country called Kenya. And that's the issue with Africa. People always worrying about, fighting and stuff sometimes, because they were forced to sort of cohabit in one nation. And if a lot of interests of some of these guys are not met, then, there has to be some sort of, fussing and fighting or strifes and issues, and because we were sort of forced, okay, this is gonna call Kenya, this territory is gonna call Tanzania, but we were one people, same roots, one nation before, the colonialists came and stuff like that. But my point is, if me as a Luo, I went to a Luya or Kikuyu or Meru, and that's just Kenya alone, basically I would come out well equipped, more knowledgeable about doing things and stuff like that. If I went to Ethiopia, which is a country of 100 and possibly more than 100 million, and they've got more than 100 different tribes, you'd get to learn a lot, man. If I came here to the United States, you get to see, like I'm telling you, like, if you went to China, for instance, or Asia, I've heard, if like the appointment is at 8 o'clock, you're supposed to be there by 7:30. Here in America, 8 means 8, Back in Africa, 8 is like 9, man, or maybe 10, And so it makes you a little bit more knowledgeable and totally understanding of other people, where other people are coming from. Because you're not who you are. You must be defined by the environment where you came from. So it's up to you. It's up to you to choose whether you stick to those roots or you make yourself even much better and stuff like that. So, nothing against people only have one way of doing things, but I would encourage them, honestly, to basically, if you only know English, and I've met a lot of Americans who are always like, oh man, I wish I spoke more than one language, or some of them are always traveling to Mexico, or, going to other different nations to learn. And, there are lots of, foreigners here in the United States who basically teach language and stuff. And so I would say the situation is kind of, improving and stuff. But if you're listening to this podcast today and, you stick to your own ways, I would tell you, go out there and explore, go here and conquer, conquer in a good way, not like in a negative way and stuff, but just go in and learn the language and boom, you're going to see the difference for sure. You get to meet if I wouldn't know English, then I would have been talking to you on this podcast today, or have been understanding each other. So I wouldn't even have known you,
Yeah.
Who knows, maybe. But yeah, so go and just explore. I love to explore, honestly. Yeah. Including even the language of animals. That's one thing that now I'm so much into. I mean, I pretty much know more than I do because you've been hanging out with bears, right? But I would like to know, the animal language too.
Are you talking about verbal language or just like the way they communicate, like through expressions? Or
Well, verbal we may never know,
Yeah.
I don't know, but non-verbal is also important because animals are brilliant,
Yeah.
I mean, I've mingled with your dogs, right here. And I could, like I was telling you, we just went out hiking today, and your dog Raz, basically a 5-year-old, what's the breed?
Australian cattle dog, blue heeler.
Yeah. And so every time that I saw people coming, and in my culture, as someone who's younger, you must stay on the other side of the road and let the older people pass, I even sometimes I do it for the younger folks because I know they don't know, but I just let them pass out of courtesy, And so I was doing that, you notice I was a bit slow, And so I was doing that to let them pass because that's culture where I come from, And so your dog also realized that. And, I didn't tell your dog anything, but, I kept on pushing her on the side. And there was a time when someone was coming and your dog just went on the side. And so how beautiful is that, if a dog can do it, what about you?
Yeah. I'm of the belief that animals think more similarly to humans than people give them credit for. I think people in general think animals are just having sort of barely existent thoughts. But I think in general, I don't think there's language. They're definitely not thinking in English, but I think they're able to understand emotion and really convey meaning to each other just through their body language and their facial expressions.
Absolutely. Yeah, language is a beautiful thing. I would tell you that for sure. And I have listened to a lot of podcasts, especially, and I'm always looking at, I can't understand French podcasts, Spanish podcasts, German podcasts, Portuguese podcasts and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm missing a lot, since I only know English, because that was like the language of instruction, mostly, in primary school, high school, and, university, and still that's the official language of business and stuff. And so I would say that the way I'm thinking is actually one-sided because it's like English from an English person point of view. But how does a French person think? How does the voice intonation and how does a German think? How does a Portuguese think? How does a Spanish person think? And so I'm always trying to. You can't know everything for sure, but it's just good to know a little bit of everything somehow. So I'm totally fascinated with languages, and this is also coming off from a rich background in the sense of like language and culture, where you grow up, you just can't stick to one language at all. You gotta learn other people's language and ways of doing things, because we were forced to sort of stay in one country, and so you can't survive if, it's just like here, you can't eat one meal because you're Irish, you're just gonna eat like Irish dishes, right? You gotta try out Italian pizza, pasta, and, try out tortilla, burrito and stuff like that. So, yeah, I see it. Even if you only stick with your language, you're gonna try out other kind of things too. So, which is a beautiful thing, I gotta admit, honestly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I'm the same. I really love language. And I just think you'd probably know better than me. You speak a lot more languages, but as I've learned a second language and I've started learning a third in Portuguese, I've dabbled a little bit in French and a tiny bit in Russian as well. But what I find is that it's at first when I started learning language, everything just seemed so different. It was like, we do it that way, and in Spanish it's this way instead of But as I kind of go, it's more and more. I just notice the similarities, like the overlaps far outweigh the dissimilarities, and I've also noticed too when I'm traveling, like a smile, a thumbs up, that is universal, and I really think like you can, that it's universal to, I can go to Kenya and I can give someone a thumbs up, they'll know exactly what I mean, and I can also give my dog a smile and he'll know exactly what I mean too, so I've found that a lot of communication is universal by sort of exploring the differences.
Because you know what, we are one people basically. We are one people. We all have red blood, whatever. We all have eyes. We all have whatever we do, and we all go to the toilet. Not to be hopefully you're not having your lunch meal or anything while listening to this podcast and stuff. But we are one people, and that's why we've got this unit. There could be someone deep in the forest in the Amazon. There could be someone back in Russia. There could be someone back in South Africa, And when these three people meet, they might not be speaking the same language, but they're gonna pass a message to each other, verbally or non-verbally, which just shows you, we are one people and stuff.